Thank you so much for being here, watching tonight, watching at a later date. I am so excited that we are Kendra Holliday and David Wraith, and we are with Sex Positive St. Louis. And tonight's presentation is by Ryn, one of our most amazing people in our organization. And Ryn is a sex coach in training, and we are Sex Positive St. Louis. And tonight, Ryn will be teaching us all about what it means to be non-binary. And I thought this would be a really good topic to cover because I've noticed that sometimes when I talk about non-binary and gender kind of concepts out in the wild, out in the vanilla world, that the concept of non-binary, transgender comes up. People who are 50 and up, which includes my demographic, they sometimes have a little reaction, like a little face reaction. They might sneer or make some kind of like face. And I question them. And I want to present this for them and for anybody curious about anything that has to do with the non-binary. And I think that their reaction comes from a place of fear or ignorance, and they're getting misinformation from the media. So I really am excited to hear from someone with personal experience, and what that is where Ryn comes in, and Ryn is open to your respectful questions. So from Wikipedia, non-binary is a term for gender identities that are not solely male or female, that are identities outside the gender binary. Non-binary identities often fall under the transgender umbrella, since non-binary people typically identify with a gender that is different from the sex assigned to them at birth. Though some non-binary people do not consider themselves transgender, just so you know. Non-binary people may identify as a separate third gender, identify with more than one gender, no gender, or have a fluctuating gender identity, as in gender fluid, gender blending. So what does it mean to be non-binary? How long has this concept been around? How do people discover they are non-binary? How do you know? How do you know who you are? What are some of the ways non-binary folks express themselves? What challenges do non-binary people face in our society? How, most importantly, how can we best support the people we know who are non-binary? And so with that, I am going to turn it over to Ryn and share. How do we share the screen with you, Ryn?
This is where I come into play. What I do next is I hit share, and hang on, I just want to make sure I don't spoil anybody with things yet, because I want, big old reveal. All right, I hit share screen, and boom. And
thank you.
Let me see. And let me just turn on, see, view. Should be under slideshow. Here we go, slideshow from the beginning. All right, can you all see it?
Yes.
Then, with no further ado, let us begin. Like Kendra explained, my name is Ryn, and I am a sex coach in training, while I'm also a non-binary individual too. And this is Non-Binary 101, a simple guide to the they/them, presented by me, Ryn Relerford. Now, before we begin, though, I always like to put a disclaimer here when it comes to doing presentations. So the disclaimer is simple. This is meant to be an open space for learning. If you have any questions, make sure they do not come from a place of hate. And please be respectful of the things that will be said. And, I will also be sharing my personal experience, being non-binary. But at the end of the day, there's one thing I need everyone to please pay attention to. I am not a monolith. What that means is, even though I'm a non-binary person and I'm sharing with you all my personal experiences and things that I've went through from being non-binary, it does not 100% apply to, every non-binary person. Like, my experiences will be extremely different than another person's experiences, and their experiences will be extremely different from another person. Like I said, we all may be non-binary, but our journeys and the things we went through are all going to be 1,000% different from each other. But with no further ado, what is non-binary though? Because I feel like, in this day and age and with society, a lot of people are going around saying, what is non-binary? What is this? Is this a new thing? Is this something that they're making up and stuff? Because this is a term and phrase that tends to, be said a lot. But let's dive into that a little bit further. But to answer that, we have to ask another question. And that question is, what is gender? Okay. The World Health Organization's definition of gender refers to the characteristics of women, men, girls, and boys that are socially constructed. This includes norms, behaviors, and roles associated with being a woman, a man, girl, boy, etc., as well as relationships with each other. As a social construct, gender varies from society to society and can change over time. But this is the most important part here. Now, this is extremely important. What is in your pants is not gender. Whatever's in your pants, that has nothing to do with gender. Okay. That is separate from your gender. Okay. Keep that in mind. That is a very important concept. And this is something that a lot of people tend to say, link together. They tend to say what's in your pants and what your gender is the exact same thing. You can't change that. You'll always be this or that or any of that. That is not true. Okay, because like I said, gender is socially constructed. We, socially constructed gender, and thus we identify on how we choose to identify. But let's go a little bit further now. What's non-binary? So being non-binary is a gender identity. Okay, it has nothing to do with your sexuality or whom you are attracted to. You see, there are people I've met who, when I tell them I'm non-binary, sometimes they sometimes say, oh, Ryn's non-binary. That means Ryn likes boys, and that means Ryn likes men and women. And I go, no, that's not what that means. Oh, I got it. That means you're not attracted to either or. No, that's not either. That really doesn't have anything to do with that either. And I go, oh, you what does that mean? That's what the conversation usually leads to. So, but the key thing you got to know is that not being non-binary is 100% associated with your gender identity. Whom you identify as does not determine whom you are attracted to. There are people who can have zero interest in sex and still identify as non-binary. That doesn't change who they're attracted to. That just changes how they identify. Now, non-binary, though, it is a term used to describe someone whose gender falls outside the gender binary, like man or woman. And remember, gender is not what is in your pants, okay? It is an umbrella term, okay? That's what non-binary is. It's much like how different sexualities can be, umbrella terms. But let's keep going with that, yes? So as you can see, this little chart here, this is what I mean by umbrella term. You see, non-binary encompasses a plethora of different gender identities. People with these identities fall under the non-binary umbrella. You see, they may not, now, even though they have these different identities, as you can see, some may not identify as non-binary because these identities can fit them more than the term non-binary. Think, what's the best way to describe this? Think of it like bisexuality and asexuality, okay? Both of those two are also umbrella terms, especially if you look at asexuality, because you got asexuality, then you got demisexual and things like that. And with bisexuality, you got things like pansexual. They're umbrella terms. And non-binary itself also is an umbrella term, but it's also a part of the trans umbrella. You see, what that means, you see, some people who are non-binary, they can choose to identify as maybe gender fluid, agender, demigender. There's a whole world of things they can choose to identify as. But at the end of the day, it's all about what is it that they feel 100% identifying as. They don't have to identify as non-binary. Just like just like how being non-binary falls under the trans umbrella, some non-binary people may not identify as trans, but some do, and that's okay. It's just how they choose to identify. But I am jumping all over the place on a whole bunch of different things. We are primarily focusing on just the non-binary identity for now. But what does it mean to be non-binary? To be non-binary means you do not identify as man or woman or the gender you were assigned at birth. You could identify as both, or you can identify as neither. You can identify as a weird mix of more masculine than feminine, or vice versa. It's very unique. And like I said, it totally depends on the person. Like I said earlier, some may identify as trans, but some may not. But they are still under the trans umbrella. And that is one, and like I said, it's okay because some people are really exploring and just seeing what feels right to them, and whatever they choose to identify as, that's good because it's the identity that feels right to them. Now, to identify as the gender you were born as is being known as cisgender. Contrary to popular belief, it is not a slur. There has been push over, I want to say more recently, that they're trying to say the term cis is a slur, and that you should not be using that word. The thing is, it's not a slur. It's to tell someone, I guess what I'm trying to say is to tell someone that I am not going to use the word cis because cis is a slur is basically a step trying to erase anyone trying to identify as, a different gender, which it's not right. And also, it's just a phrase to classify, oh, that person is cisgender. The end. Just like you see, oh, that person is transgender. That person is not identifying as the gender they were assigned at birth. So, that's okay. They're not cis. Now when it comes to being non-binary, some people may change their pronouns, their appearance, or overall presentation. There is no right or wrong way to be non-binary. As I keep mentioning, it's totally up to the person. Like, some people who are non-binary may choose to be more masculine or be more feminine. It's The world is your oyster. Or basically, your gender is your oyster. You can do whatever you want with it. You should not be held back to any restrictions or constraints that does not feel right to you. You should be free to be and identify and play around and experiment. This is the joy of life and living. So let's do a little historical context, okay? Because, it's important to know how do we get here and, how everything came to be. So being non-binary is a new thing, but kinda. I mean, it is, but it's not. Let me explain. The concept of it has existed for ever. Okay. We just been referring to it under different names. Now, the only thing that is new is the word. And there are some people who like labels or some people who don't like labels. And I understand, both sides. I really do. But I will say this, sometimes labels can help. They help us get an idea of, where we're at and, where we can branch out from that label that was established. But like I said, it is something that has been around for ever. The unique way to understand this is you got to look at it from other parts of the world. For example, in the Americas, the Mayan, the Olmec, the Aztec understood more than two kinds of bodies and genders. Incan shamans had a tendency of mixing both genders in rituals. With North American tribes, you have a term and phrase called two-spirit, which is someone who has both masculine and feminine spirits. Now, I am not Native American or come from any indigenous tribes or First Nations, but but from what I've heard from some friends of mine who are Native American, they do use the word two-spirit to refer to themselves as non-binary. In the Middle East, you have something called the Mukanathun. It existed in pre-Islamic Arabia. It translates to effeminate men or men who engage in feminine functions. It can be seen as someone who with ambiguous sexual characteristics. Over around in Egypt, you had something called hmm, the sekhet. It is an Egyptian third gender. It was used to describe eunuchs, even though these eunuchs were not even castrated. Now, if we were to jump over to Asia, religions in India make mention of a third gender. Tritiya Parakriti, a third gender in Vedic culture. And in case you all, and for some of you all who are history buffs, Vedic culture dates back to at least 1200 BCE. So yeah, this has been around a long time. Also, third gender is mentioned in the Kama Sutra. So once again, been around for a while. And in Japan, they actually have a phrase called X gender. It's a gender queer and non-binary term, and it is currently in use today. Actually, I can actually give a very great example of this. There is a manga series called Fushigi Yugi, and the creator of the series, not long ago, I want to say in the past 5 years, came out as being X gender. But yeah, like I said, it's been around. So with that, anyway, as I was saying, so time for a little bit of say some terminology. Yes. Up. Think something froze. Give me a second. Up. Let me just double check. Okay. So anyway, some words and some words to know when talking to or about non-binary people. The first word you got is NB. It's short for non-binary. It's just an easy way to say it. You know, uh, I'm all for shortening words. Next thing you got the word AMAB, which is assigned male at birth. You have AFAB, assigned female at birth. This is one way on how some people who are binary, let's just say they have to fill out some medical forms or whatnot, and they tend to write down, "Oh, I was AMAB or AFAB." You got another phrase called gender dysphoria, which is a feeling of unease when your biological sex may not uh looks like a bit of a spelling error, but basically may not align with your gender identity. And honestly, it sucks when gender dysphoria hits because it can throw you completely out of whack. It makes it feel like, you're not doing your best, or no matter how hard you try, you're still gonna constantly look, the gender that you know, your biological sex that you were assigned with at birth. And it's not fun. It really isn't. I should know. I do go through gender dysphoria, and it can put you in a little bit of a low place. But gigantic but then you got something like gender euphoria, which is satisfaction or joy caused when one's gendered experience aligns with their gender identity rather than with the gender they were assigned at birth. There's just such a it's like a gender euphoria, and to me it's like a high. Like, it's kind of funny when wearing certain clothes, getting your hair cut a certain way, getting rid of like all facial hair, it makes you feel like, you're on cloud nine. You're like on a whole different level. It's like it's such a freeing moment. It makes you feel like that you're on top of the world, that you're invincible, that nothing can, take you down. And that's an amazing feeling to have. Sorry, I'm sorry. It's just when you go through when you were in gender dysphoria and then instantly go into gender euphoria, it is just amazing because you're really starting to express yourself. You start going, this is who I am. This is how I feel. I feel like I'm being seen for who I really am. It's just an amazing feeling. Anyway, you also have HRT, hormone replacement therapy, and FFS, facial feminization surgery. These are some ways, or basically, these are some examples of gender affirming care. Now, not every non binary person or trans person will go through HRT or FFS. And that's okay, because at the end of the day, it's all about how they choose and want to identify. But let's move on to pronouns. We all have personal pronouns, but MB people may use a variety of different pronouns, such as he, him, or she, her, or they, them. And yes, singular they, them is appropriate. Don't listen to what people say. It exists, it was a thing, and it changed that. It's not that it was a thing, it is a thing and will forever be a thing. And this has been dating back to the 14th century. Okay, because there are people out there who will say you can't use singular they them. English professors can verify you can use singular they them. But hey, even more pronouns. I want to welcome you all to the world of neo-pronouns. Now, some people may feel that he, she, they may not 100% fit them. Thus, you have these new pronouns that can help NB people feel more comfortable. Some may include ze, they, and her, or ni, ne, near, or vi, ve, virs. And there's a whole bunch more. And some people may want to push back against neo pronouns, but at the end of the day, though, it's not like we're applying the pronouns to you. It's just the way they want to identify and what feels right. And there's some non-binary people who play around with neo pronouns. They play around with a whole bunch of pronouns to figure out what feels right to them, what is the best way for them to identify. And honestly, this is a good thing because we want them to explore themselves. We want them to see what feels right, because what may feel right for one non-binary person may not feel right for all non-binary people, which goes back to what I said. We're not a monolith. So let's talk about expression and support. You see, express yourself. When I mentioned earlier about people playing around with different pronouns, this is a pure example, but it's not the only example. You could do things such as dressing a certain way or styling your hair differently. Some prefer to use different pronouns and names. Like, for example, I use they, them, and I go by Ryn. Some may go through HRT, but those that don't go through HRT are not any less NB or trans than others. They are still 100% trans and non-binary. It's all about what feels right to them. And hey, some may change their mannerisms and or train their voice. I know side note, I have done some voice training on my end, and it's possible to do it. I've done it. The only downside is it requires me to do a whole lot of focus, because there have been times I sit there and, I do want to talk with a much more higher and softer voice because it feels right to me. It makes me feel, 100%, me. And it brings me joy when I can talk like this. But, when I go to work, I have to bring my voice down to, a level where I don't want to, where not a lot of people will be on the up and up with it, but it's all about what feels right. And also at times it requires a lot of concentration to maintain that voice and to, keep that whole mindset, because it gets a little challenging. I guess the main thing is it's all about if you can keep on doing it and if you can maintain that focus. Also, I do voice act too, and playing around with voices is a lot of fun. Now, supporting the MB homies, everybody. You don't have to understand their experience to respect them. I have to stress that because I feel like a lot of people do want to, they go off of we as people, we as humans, a lot of times for humans, they tend to have the belief of, if I don't understand it, I don't think I will respect it at times. But sometimes you don't have to understand everything or you don't have to understand everything to respect it. You just have to understand this is who they are, and this is who they want to be identified as, and this is how they want to be seen, and just accept it, move on. And it's also important to encourage them to explore themselves, especially if they are just coming out. And also try to avoid using gendered words. Trust me, there are alternatives to everything. And it also doesn't hurt to ask what words are okay. Like, here's an example. I like using the word dude. I treat the word dude as gender neutral, but not everybody is okay with the word dude. So sometimes I will ask people, hey, you okay if I use dude? Okay. Just to ask, just to make sure, is this okay or not? And also respect the pronouns and if you don't know what a person's personal pronouns are, that's okay. It's absolutely okay to ask. And even if you mess up, because let's be honest, we all mess up. I mess up. If everybody messes up, that is not, it's okay if you mess up. The question is, do you learn from your mistakes after messing up? That is what is important. It is important to correct yourself. And if someone says, like, let's just say you're talking to someone and you go, oh yeah, he's awesome. And they go, oh, I'm sorry. Oh, they're awesome. Then you move on from that. It's more important that, you basically correct yourselves and just show that, hey, I understand and I come from a different era, but I'm still learning and I still, respect you and everything. And also, if you have kids that are NB, be their biggest fan and support them on this journey. This is not an easy journey. I should know. Well, then again, I'm getting too far ahead of myself. This is not an easy journey, okay? It is really, it can have some highs, it can have some lows, but at the end of the day, what we are doing when we are on this journey is exploring ourselves and understanding ourselves a lot better. And it takes time, but and at the end of the day though, if you are a parent with a kid who's NB, they need that support. They need to know that, hey, it's okay what you're going through. Just let me know how I can help and how I can support you and just go from there. Now, using non-gendered words 101. Instead of brother or sister, you can use sibling. Instead of mom or dad, you can use Zaza, Zeze, or Zari. Instead of boyfriend, girlfriend, or husband and wife, you can use partner or significant other. Instead of sir or ma'am, you can use misser. Or instead of Mr., Miss, or Mrs., you can use mix. You have options. And also, we have Google, and Google can give you an option or answer to almost anything. But let me tell you some things that you should not do. One, do not misgender people behind their back because when you do that, that just shows you really have no respect for them. Even if you don't agree with it, it's best that still don't misgender them because that's just rude. And also, do not discredit their gender identity because you don't understand it. And it sucks because I understand that you want to, be supportive, but discrediting who they are just because you don't understand it isn't right. You can because listen, there are some things I go through that people will never understand, but there are things that other people go through that I will never understand. I'll never understand, say what's a good example? I'll never understand what a person goes through, where the person with the uterus goes through. I'll never understand it. And you know what? And that's okay. But I will not discredit what they are going through or their experiences with having one. Because at the end of the day, they just want, to be acknowledged for who they are and just be respected for that. Also, please do not openly support someone who is anti-trans. I mean, it's a given. No matter what, because there's a whole lot of anti-trans rhetoric going on. And some people may say, but I like that person because they did blah, blah, blah. And I go, I get that, but they openly, they actively try to discredit and try and force people not to be trans though. Also, do not bully or mock someone who is NB or trans. Um, Next Benedict, if some of you all know, was a trans individual who was bullied, made fun of, and died. It's not fun, and it's just not right. You just don't. Now, also, do not ask if they are AMAB or AFAB or what's in their pants, because ultimately, it is really none of your business. I mean, the question is, what purpose do you need to know what's in someone's pants, or what purpose do you need to know if they are AMAB or AFAB? Because at the end of the day, they're non-binary. It should not matter why they are AMAB or AFAB to you, unless you are a medical professional getting ready to conduct some work that you don't need to know. And also, do not discriminate on how an MB person presents. There is no right or wrong way to be non-binary. Like I said, we are not a monolith. We all have different shapes, colors, sizes, everything. We all have different ways on how we choose to present ourselves. So the question is, how does someone know that they are non-binary? Okay, now this is a very good question, and there is a very good answer. You see, the answer is very simple. And by simple, I mean very complex. You could ask yourself various questions. You can ask, do I feel like the gender I was assigned? Do I wish to mix various aspects of the binary genders? Do I feel like my gender is not with the binary? I was actually talking to one of my friends, and what he said is, before he came out as trans, he always felt like anytime he dated a guy, he always said, this feels gay. And yeah, sure enough, turns out he was trans. But overall, it's still very complex because it varies on the person. So with that being said, everybody, we're going to take a look at one specific person and see their journey and how this person realized they were non-binary. Case study, Ryn Relerford, aka this person here. A little personal flair. I was born 7/11, 1990. Insert Slurpee reference, because you all are thinking that. As a kid, I was extremely emotional and really bonded with the girls. I never really felt like I was part of the guys. I felt like an outsider. Then again, I was super into fantasy, superheroes. I was like really nerdy growing up. I was watching a lot of Power Rangers. Now, let's talk about me and when I first heard of the purple one. See that picture of me? The one right there? That was me circa 2001/2. I see the movie Purple Rain and become fascinated with Prince. I started asking my mom a bunch of questions about him. I mean, what is Prince? Is Prince gay? She says no. Is Prince a guy or a girl? She goes, no, Prince is a guy. But why does Prince look like that or dress like that? Well, because Prince is Prince. Made me really start questioning a lot. And mind you, I was like 11 years old. So I was a very smart kid, and I started doing my own research on things, and I researched the word androgyny, and I learned more about it. I thought, mixing characteristics about, male and female. I thought, okay, this is what this sounds right. This sounds awesome. I really like this. This is what I want. I have a new goal. I have a desire to be androgynous. And on the same day, that did not last long. Because, like I said, on that same day, so growing up, I grew up in the church, and things like this were wrong. So I ended up burying that. So let's talk about me in puberty. Growing never stops. I tried being a quote unquote man, and I forced myself to believe what the church tells me, never questioning it. I become a hateful person. Really regret those times. I was basically just acting on what the church said. The church tell me blank, and I followed and believed blank, no questions asked. And all the feelings I had about my gender identity were all super repressed. But I secretly find an outlet to express myself. Oh, and I got deep into anime. I'm really nerdy. But you see, after you see what I've a way I found the best way I found to express myself was through fan fiction, creating my own stories, creating my own fantasy role plays, where I would, create my own character on online games. And, I could say, I'm this, I'm that, I'm doing all of these things, and, funny thing, a lot of the characters I made were androgynous or women, and I loved it because it felt right to me. It brought me happiness. It brought me joy. It let me express myself in the way that felt right. God, it was so good. And also, I became super obsessed with this. This is a certain anime character. You see, around this time, I want to say I was like getting close to around high school age, like late middle school, early high school. There was an anime that came out called Inuyasha, and in this anime, I was fascinated with this character here. The character's name is Jakotsu. Take a good look at Jakotsu. This is a man, and he was super feminine. I thought, why am I so obsessed with him? He's so cool. I wish I could be him. But moving on, the canon event that led to my change as a whole. So between May and August of 2008, I was around the ages of say 17/18. I go to Japan. I live with a Japanese family and everything. And while there, it became an eye-opening experience because, at the time I was a part of a youth group. I was going to church all the time. And I'm in Japan. And while there, I'm thinking, wow, this is awesome. Where's the closest church at? I don't see a church. I found one church throughout my whole time in Japan. And while there, I went to a Japanese shrine. I went to a Shinto shrine, and you know, Japanese religion is extremely different than Christianity. And I I went through one all the motions they did, and it was a life-changing experience. It was a real eye-opener. It made me question everything around me. I started going, what if we're all wrong? What if at the end of the day, this was never about this, but just being a really good person and respecting your fellow human. And this was the eye opening moment. It changed me. I thought, this is amazing. This was so great. When I came back to the United States, I wanted to share these feelings and thoughts with my youth group, and that did not go well. Oh boy, that really did not end 100% well on that. But let's talk about me in college. So this is me around say 2012 to 2013. Yeah. I studied psychology and religion. I can talk a lot about religion and psychology. But fact of the matter is, I got involved with anime conventions, working for a maid cafe. And around this time, my youth group really isn't quite happy with me because I've been asking a whole lot of questions and questioning a lot of things they did. Mysticism and Sex, circa 2014 to 2017. I get a deck of tarot cards and I have sex. It's awesome. It feels amazing. It's literally like, I don't even know. It's like an explosion of so many things washing over me. But I noticed something. I never felt like I'm a man when I'm with someone or a woman. I always felt like, I'm something else. I always felt like, you know, I I exist, but I'm not I don't feel like what it is that I'm supposed to be. And but at the time I'm still identifying as, cis hetero. Enlightenment and passion. 2019, around August, I've been watching an anime called JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Trust me, it is an extremely hard series to explain, but fact of the matter is, I get into a heated argument. Okay. You see, the main thing about JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is the characters. If you look on the character so basically the argument I had with someone, the guy was sitting there going, I hate how the characters became more feminine looking. And I go, what are you talking about? And he goes, well, the men, they used to be super masculine. Now they look like women. I go, what are you saying? They look amazing. They are perfect. They are being their true selves. And this is what I mean. You see this guy with the blue hair and everything? That's the character from the first part of the series, okay? The guy on the right is from the fifth part of the series. You see a gigantic difference. And yes, the one on the right is a man. You know, a lot of people always get confused when they see this. But the fact of the matter is, I literally explode, okay? And it woke something up in me. Everything came out. I properly started questioning everything. I started questioning myself, my identity. Why did I feel like this? And it's so weird though. Back when I told you about me and how I questioned being androgynous and everything, those memories came surging back, and it reminded me of who I was and what is it that I really wanted to be. And I officially came out. And now here I am now. I play around with a whole bunch of ideas. Sometimes I like to express myself with cosplay, or sometimes I just like to put on makeup. I can it always changes, and I feel like, my gender can be in flux a lot. But at the end of the day, I'm just a very unique non-binary individual who's super proud of who they are. There are days I can be super masculine, there are days I can be super feminine. There are days I can be both. There are days I can be neither. There are days where I just want to lay down and look at the stars and exist. But at the end of the day, I get to be me. I wouldn't want to be anybody but me. Now, final summary. 1, just be nice and respectful to NB folks. 2, if you notice hate or discrimination, please say something. It really, really is important if you say something in a rally and help rally people. And also, not all NB folks are the same. Their experiences will vary. And if you are seeking more information, you see that QR code? Scan it. It'll take you to my blog called the Galactic Chaos blog. It's a blog where I link all things sex positivity, gender identity, and all nerdy stuff. And you'd be really shocked at how much nerdy stuff can have an influence on sex and gender identity. But yeah, that's all I got. And I thank you all for, watching, listening, and whatnot.